No, it might not make much sense, but he was agile enough to jump without ever getting up. Sis, oh, pardon me. He had some dust on his shoulder. That was not true. If the dust was on his shoulder, why brush his cheek? Perrin's every movement was studied and elegant. Each gesture exuded womanliness. Her eyes were smiling gently, but to Maomao she looked like a hungry carnivore. Perrin had been taking tea for the past several days. This meant she hadn't been seeing clients. It was not a sign that she couldn't attract paying customers. Instead, it showed that working every day was beneath her. However, there was a problem. Perrin did not like drinking tea. She was feeling unsatisfied with her appetite. What is going on? Basin tried to move back, but the shop was small. Perrin quickly cornered him. Gracious, it is still there. Here, hold still and I will get it for you. Maomao moved her mortar and pestle out of the way. She put them up on a shelf before Basin could stumble over them. She held the tray of teacups and snacks in her hand. She would give him the first time free. Basin's face was pale and flushed at the same time. If Lehaku showed up at this exact moment, things would really get interesting. Maomao put on her shoes and munched on one of the snacks she was safeguarding. They were not as nice as the ones brought out when Jinchi visited. That was just like the old lady. Still, they were perfectly luxurious, thin rice crackers with a mild taste of shrimp. It was just the sort of thing Maomao liked. Oh man, I got it. He is a virgin, she thought. There was just something about him that conveyed it. It made sense now, she thought as she leaned against a wall and took another bite of a rice cracker. Then she washed it down with tea. She saw an apprentice watching her enviously, but she could hardly give the girl a snack right in front of the madam. Instead, she decided not to eat the last cracker, but to save it for the girl later. Ugh, I gave you what I was sent here to give you. I am leaving, Basin said, trying to pull his belt tight again. Perrin had almost gotten it off him as he fled the shop. Maomao wondered if she should tell him that his underwear was showing. Or, Perrin said, sitting down, a virgin and I almost had him. She thought so too. Perrin would have been an exemplary elder sister if not for behavior like this. Maomao felt she was getting worse every year. And to think one taste and it's paradise, the madam said regretfully. Ah, pretty sure you mean hell, Maomao thought. She'd better tell Lehaku to hurry up and save his money. He needs to buy Perrin out before Chuyu got old enough to catch the princess's eye. Seizun was sweeping by the front gate. Until he became strong enough to work as a proper manservant, he was stuck doing apprentice work. That is how Ukyo, the foreman of the menservants, managed things. If a candidate seemed too content with menial labor, Ukyo decided he did not have what it took to become a worthwhile member of the staff. He would then be released. Men who showed annoyance at doing work usually done by young girls and tried to learn other jobs were welcome to join the team. Seeing Seizun humming a tune as he swept the ground made Maomao think he would not stay at their establishment for much longer. Hey, Maomao said quickly. Seizun had changed out of his dirty clothes and shaved his beard, making him look several years younger. The book is here. She showed him the volumes Basin had brought her, which she had wrapped in a carrying cloth. There was a clear thunk as she set it down. And it is not what you said it would be. The encyclopedia, including the books Seizun had brought with him, came to 14 volumes in total. However, none of them seemed to contain anything about locusts. Maomao remembered the 14 books from when she had been in that little room, so she knew the numbers matched. What? But that doesn't make any sense. Seizun undid the cloth and looked at the books. He squinted, inspecting them closely, and then his face darkened. This isn't all of them, he announced. It's all the books that were in that room, Maomao said, confident that even she could count to 14. No, I mean these specifically, Seizun said, picking up the bug-related tomes. There were 2 of them, clearly labelled I and II. There were supposed to be 3 volumes about insects. What? That meant there was at least one book that had never been in that room, or at least someone had removed it before Maomao got there. I wonder who would ever take something like that, Seizun said. It looks like you would. No. During the old guy's time, the book was there, I know it was. The old guy was presumably the physician who had been banished from the rear palace. He had been researching an elixir of immortality, or so Maomao had heard. I wonder if they buried him with it or something, Seizun said. Why in the world would they do that? It is a tradition in my hometown, he explained. Well, she wasn't asking about Seizun's hometown, was she? But she was curious about the old guy. Why did he die anyway? Had it been simple old age? If he had lived, he would have been about the same age as Maomao's old man, so it would not be that surprising. The deceased physician was also said to have studied in the West at one point. Perhaps they had known each other. Ah. Well, it was an experiment gone wrong. Gone wrong? They were trying to create an elixir of immortality, right? And to do that you have to test it out, don't you? Does that mean there was something Maomao had been wondering about, something about the resurrection drug that had been used on Chu Yu and the other children? Chu Yu had gotten off with just some mild paralysis, but a drug that effectively killed you and then brought you back to life would never simply work that well on the first try. They must have conducted a series of experiments, gradually increasing the prospect of success. So how had they done the experiments? They used rats, yes, but to really know it was going to work, you would eventually have to test it on actual human beings. Hey. What's wrong with you? Seizen grimaced. Maomao wondered why for a moment, but she soon realized she was grinning horribly from ear to ear. Tell me, where did they bury him? No idea. I wasn't the one in charge of that sort of thing. Who was? Seizen scratched his head. I suppose you would know her as Suhari. She was the old man's helper, you know, the one who rarely showed emotion. She was the young mistress's older half-sister, as they called her. A shock ran through Maomao, and before she knew it, she smacked Seizen on the shoulder as hard as she could. Why hadn't she realized it sooner? Suhari was a surviving member of the Shi clan. She was the previous emperor's granddaughter and Shisui's half-sister. Ouch, what did you do that for? I've got it, you just keep sweeping. Don't slack. Maomao rewrapped the book in its cloth, then rushed back to her shop to write a letter. She requested a manservant to deliver her missive as soon as possible. Writing directly to Jinshi would have been to overstep herself. So she typically addressed her letters to either Gaoshun or Basin, but given that Basin didn't always seem to have it together very well, she mostly wrote to Gaoshun. The next morning came quickly, and with it came an answer to her letter. A carriage to pick her up followed closely behind. The journey would take her to where Suhari was. Maomao had heard she was now living with Duo, a former high consort. Maomao gave the encyclopedia volumes to a servant who came with the carriage, then closed the shop door. Oh, you get to go out. Lucky you, Chu Yu said, tugging on Maomao's sleeve. She frowned at him. Take me too? Absolutely not. Not only Suhari but the other Shi clan children lived with Duo. Keeping Chu Yu away from all of them was the whole point of having him here. She wasn't about to take him straight to them. Jerk, you get to have all the fun, I'm going for work. Perhaps you can pass the time by cleaning in front of the shop. She patted him on the head and then passed him off to Ukyo. Ukyo liked children, so he went away with Chu Yu riding on his shoulders. The new girl, the poor man's daughter, was also hanging around. Her older sister was currently being evaluated as an apprentice. The madam made it clear that if she proved to be a poor learner, she would soon be dismissed. Their father had come to take them back several times, but each time the menservants chased him away. He had also tried to intimidate Maomao, but it was his daughter who said she wanted to be a courtesan. Maomao had not been involved then, and she wasn't involved now. Most importantly, she still hadn't received any money. Come on, hurry up and pay me. She hoped his payment would appropriately reflect the complete success of her efforts. Maomao looked over at Chu Yu riding on Ukko's shoulders. What are we going to do about him? If he hadn't been partially paralyzed, they could have trained him as one of the menservants. But to be a bouncer at a brothel required a certain level of physical capacity. Maybe I should make him an apothecary, Maomao thought. At the moment, Chu Yu showed no interest in medicinal matters. Maomao, by contrast, had already known 100 different formulae by his age. How can he not be interested when it is so fascinating? Maomao got into the carriage, pouting a little. Duo's residence was grand and sumptuous, as befitted an imperial villa. Maomao was made to change clothes before she disembarked from the carriage. She knew Duo did not particularly care about such niceties, but propriety demanded it. Therefore, Maomao found herself walking along, holding up the hem of her long skirt so it would not get dirty. She passed under a magnificent gate and through a courtyard laid with gravel. The garden was like a painting with stones, gravel and moss. The beauty of the place clearly showed how proud the groundskeeper was of their work. After a short walk, Maomao arrived at a room. There she found Ardu, the mistress of the house, and another person. Both of them were dressed like men. "Welcome," Ardu said. Her voice was as clear and strong as ever, perhaps even stronger than before. The person with her was Suhari. She may have worn male clothing because she had grown accustomed to it, or perhaps she had another reason. Her expression remained as unchanging as always, and she stood one step behind Arduo. She said it seemed formalities were unnecessary. "I will be present, but do not mind me. Please speak freely." Arduo said this, then she seated herself on a couch. She gestured to Maomao, who, as a guest, sat next to her. Finally, Suhari took a seat. "Do not mind me." It was easy for her to say. How could Maomao not mind her? Despite some difficulty with the request, Maomao took the encyclopedia volumes. A servant had brought them in, and she set them on the table. If this was something they didn't want Arduo to know, then Jinshi would have presumably handled things differently. Maomao had no choice but to forge ahead. "Do you recognize these? My mentor was using them." Suhari's tone was more polite than usual, perhaps because Arduo was there. "Is this all of them?" Suhari cocked her head and looked at the books. After a moment she said, "One is missing." "I believe there should be 15 volumes. Do you know where the missing volume might be?" "I'm afraid I don't," she said softly. It didn't look like she was lying. What reason did she have to lie anyway? Any connection between her and the Shi clan was already moot. She could not show herself in public either. Her only path in life was to be sequestered in a place like this. Maomao did not know what might happen to her or what the emperor had planned for her, but she felt it was a waste. Suhari was a talented pharmacist. If she did not know where the book was, then they would have to move on to the next question. "This mentor of yours, then, do you know where he is?" The little flinch this provoked from Suhari didn't escape Maomao's notice. Arduo sipped her tea and watched them. "I knew it. He is alive," Maomao said, more as a statement than a question. "He must have tested the resurrection drug on himself." Suhari lowered her eyes, then slowly closed them. Finally she nodded in resignation. "That is right. It was the only way out of that fortress. So Suhari's mentor had taken the resurrection drug himself, under the pretense of doing an experiment. And judging by the way she spoke, he had survived the experience. But Suhari added that he would not be able to find out what he wanted to know from him. She said it did not even matter if he talked to him or not. "What do you mean?" Maomao asked. Suhari's eyes widened slightly. "The boy Chu Yu, that is what you call him now, isn't it? You know what happened to him. Can't you connect the dots? Chu Yu had taken the drug, died, and come back to life. However, it had impaired movement on one side of his body, and he had lost his memories as well. Are you suggesting your mentor is amnesiac? Not exactly, but you've got the right idea. In fact, you may have already met him without realizing it. What are you getting at?" Suhari's eyes drifted down sadly. "Do you remember the hot springs town?" "Yes, it was a hidden village that worshipped a fox deity. The light of the lanterns there still burned brightly in her memory. One of the bedridden old men there was my mentor. The hot springs town was a place for rejuvenation and recovery, and there had been more than one person who fit that description. He no longer remembers who or what he once was. If he had been well, I don't believe she would ever have imagined dragging you into all of that." Her face darkened again as she spoke the word she. Maomao didn't know what kind of relationship the half-sisters Suhari and Shisui had built together. However, she strongly suspected Suhari was smart enough to have realized that she herself was one of the reasons Shisui had done what she did. Shisui wanted to help the country prosper, but she also wanted to free her older sister from their mother's control. "I see," Maomao said, her body going limp with disappointment. She had finally dared to hope they might get some answers. No, it was too soon to give up yet. "In that case, I would like to know about the research on locusts that your mentor was doing." Maomao placed the 2 volumes about insects in front of Suhari, but the other woman shook her head again. "I had nothing to contribute to that research. I hate bugs, they were more her specialty." Suhari had developed a phobia of snakes and bugs because of the discipline-really torture she'd been subjected to. And the other girl to whom Suhari alluded was gone now. Maomao's shoulders slumped again. "When my mentor was ordered to create the elixir of immortality, Almost all the research he'd done to that point was destroyed. He could save only what was in that room. They destroyed his other work to make him focus on the elixir. Suhari's mentor wanted to continue the Locust project. He used Seizen, who obtained supplies, to conduct investigations. Then our duo, who had been silent during the conversation, spoke. Now I see. She set her teacup on the table and looked at Suhari. She appears to have been a most intelligent young woman. It does not matter how intelligent she was. She is gone now, and nothing could bring her back. Suhari seemed to have resigned herself to her sister's disappearance. Maomao clenched a fist. Do you think someone so smart would have failed to leave something behind? Maomao's mind reeled. There was a bang. Maomao put a hand on the table as Suhari stood up abruptly. My apologies, Suhari said. Not at all. You do not need to be so stiff, Arju said. I hate undue formality. Just relax. You know I do not stand on ceremony. No, Maomao thought this was an appropriate time for an apology. Nonetheless, what Arju had said teased at something in her memory. What was it? What was it? She tried to think back. Had something happened in the fortress? Or perhaps it was before that in the rear palace, or at the medical office. No, it must have been something else. Maomao smacked the table. The clinic, what about the clinic? What has happened to it? Just before being kidnapped from the rear palace, Maomao had been at the clinic. That was where she saw it, a book on the bookshelf. It was an encyclopedia about insects. She was thorough if nothing else. Maomao pictured the young woman she would not see again and smiled. She felt that she had found the one possible moment to show Maomao what she had shown her, and this overpowered the pain, making her smile wider. With Shisui's grinning, mischievous face in her mind, Maomao gave the table a hearty smack. She was told the clinic had been temporarily closed. Not all the women who worked there may have known about the escape plan, but those who did were guilty of a serious crime. Shenel's crime was the most serious of all. She had attempted to commit suicide, but she was stopped and arrested. Still, the rear palace needed the clinic to continue functioning, so it was reopened with a eunuch overseer. All items at the facility when Maomao was kidnapped had been confiscated, including the encyclopedia. Jinshi asked, "Is this what you are looking for?" He had apparently been given the day off. Outside the apothecary shop, Gaishan accepted a cup of tea from one of the apprentices. Maomao said, "If I may," and took the volume. She flipped the pages until she found the section with the most marginal notes. She opened the book slowly. A sheet covered in writing fell out. She set the book on the floor so that Jinshi could see it. Then she gently picked up the fallen sheet. Yes, this is it. The sheet was covered in detailed illustrations of insects. They all looked similar and the caption read grasshoppers, so that was probably what they were. Some of the illustrations showed the entire bug. Others were close studies of the legs or wings. There were even some colors, though they were a little faded. The illustrations seemed to be divided into two broad categories. Perhaps there was a third category if one were being precise. Maomao outlined them as she read through the text. She said, pointing to a picture daubed with green, "I gather this is a grasshopper's normal appearance." It was hard to tell from the full body illustrations, but the wing studies made it appear the wings of these insects were a bit shorter than the other two types. She continued, "And this is the kind that are expected to proliferate this year. It's this variety that causes a plague of insects." Jinshi was perfectly capable of reading the text himself, but Maomao still wanted to say it out loud. That helped the information stay in her mind and made it easier to remember. Jinshi did not stop her. Perhaps he had the same idea. The brown grasshopper had longer wings than the green one. Finally, Maomao pointed to the illustration in the center. Its size was between the green and brown grasshoppers, and its color was also a blend of the two. And the text speculates these changes may have caused the limited crop damage that occurred last year. In other words, this was a transitional stage to the brown grasshopper, so it appears. Under certain circumstances, the grasshopper's coloration changed. Also, the shape of their wings changed. This change happened over many generations. Their numbers grew with each new group of offspring. The text suggested that their bodies changed because of the growing population, or perhaps the population increased because their bodies changed shape. It thought the first explanation was more likely. In other words, the bugs that caused limited crop damage foreshadowed much more serious destruction later. Are you saying that there will be more widespread famine this year? Yes, although we cannot say just how big the scale will be. That is to say, if they misjudge the situation, many people could die of hunger. People might say they are just bugs, but sometimes those bugs could block out the sun and consume every crop in sight. Maomao, born and raised in the capital, had never seen such a thing. However, many of the girls in the pleasure district were farmers' daughters. They had been sold when a plague like this had left their families with nothing to eat. The timing could hardly have been worse.